I'd like to call this meeting to order. Oh, excuse me. I'd like to call this meeting to order. We need a motion to go into closed session.
So moved.
Well,
Oh,
Andre's got to
statement.
read.
Oh, you got it. Okay.
I move that the board enter closed session pursuant to North Carolina General Statutes 143, 318.11, subsection A1, A3, and A6, to consult with the attorney and preserve the attorney-client privilege, to consider confidential personnel matters, and to prevent the disclosure of personnel information that are confidential under North Carolina General Statutes 115C, 319, and student information that is confidential under North Carolina General Statute 115C, 402, and 20, United States Code 1232G.
Okay,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we will move.
Aye.
Okay. Okay, I got you, Will.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting of the August the 21st meeting of the Board of Education to order. We welcome everyone here tonight. Thank you for being here. We will have our public charge.
The Orange County Board of Education pledges to its citizens to conduct its business in a courteous and productive manner, showing respect for fellow board members, staff, and citizens. The board asks its citizens to conduct themselves with the same courtesy toward both school personnel and each other. A moment of silence will be observed before each meeting. The board asks that you check your cell phones and other electronic devices to be certain they are either turned off or on vibrate to avoid interruptions of the meeting.
Okay. Can you all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We will now observe a moment of silence. All right, thank you. And we will begin tonight with recognitions. And Dr. Merrill or Mr. Smith, I'm not sure who's in charge of recognitions.
Thank you, Mrs. Purcell, members of the board. We're going to have two recognitions this evening, both focused on Hillsborough Elementary School. Principal Jessica Naj is going to come and give us a little bit of an intro to the first half of the first quarter of the year, and then she's going to segue to talking about the Teacher of the Year, Adam Canosa, who's going to show off a little bit of what he's been doing. So, Mrs. Naj, come on up.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Good evening, Chair Purcell, Vice Chair Richmond, and board members. Thank you so much for having me here tonight. I am thrilled to speak with you about what's been our first 5 weeks and 1 day of school. So we are off to a wonderful start at Hillsborough this year. Our mission is ensuring student success by inspiring hearts and minds, and there has been no shortage of inspiration, curiosity, and collaboration. We do have a school-wide theme this year of the power of connection, and so we've been really purposeful about building connections throughout our school day with things like book buddies, with our community, also building connections just with teacher leadership and building more movement into our classroom setting, building in more hands-on learning. We are making a splash. You can see our dolphin wasn't there a second ago, dancing with Mr. Moreno and various other students. We're teaching our kids to be safe, respectful, responsible, and engaged leaders. Some other ways that we are off to a great start are just by keeping our MTSS structure strong at our school. We've got really strong PLCs. They're digging in, they're looking at the data, they're doing hard work, making sure that our dolphins are getting everything that we need. We have a fantastic dolphin pod, and I will say that our staff and teachers are amazing, and they have done a great job of supporting each other and supporting our students as we start the year. And I just kind of wanted to end my little section by saying that we are very grateful and very happy to have received so much support already at the start of this year. You can see that Mr. Lee Williams came to visit. I know Ms. Doyle came and opened car doors one day. Hank McKee has answered the phone every single time I have called, and I've been so grateful. We had people come and help us out with kindergarten recess when we needed support, and so we are just eternally grateful for all of the support we've gotten already this year. And without further ado, I would like to introduce you to the one, the only, Adam Canosa. He is our Teacher of the Year for very good reason. He has done some amazing work with his program, Songcraft, and as you can see in one of the pictures there, our students engaged using it. Our kids love it, and he's just done amazing work, and I'm really, really proud to be here with him tonight. Mr. Canosa.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Adam Canosa. I have had the pleasure of teaching music at Hillsborough Elementary for 11 years, my 12th year. I'm here to speak about a program that I made, but I wanted to give a little backstory on this. So coming out of the COVID pandemic into the music classroom, we were very excited to be back live, but we really couldn't do anything. Kids, at least in the classroom of my size, could barely sing together. Most of the instruments that are typical for my curriculum, we were unable to play. And so we did the best we could for a 9-week period. And then I went home over an intercession, really frustrated without being able to provide something that was engaging and could kind of bring back sort of the semblance of joy that we had prior to the pandemic in my classroom. And so I had spent the beginning months of the COVID pandemic at home, kind of treating that like the sabbatical I was never going to have from teaching, and ravenously consumed coding modules, which got me to a point where on this particular intercession, I was able to create a platform that I've called Songcraft. It is a game-based, adaptive tool that allows students to utilize their Chromebooks as a playable instrument. They can play this in ensemble as a full class, or they can play individually. And when they do play individually, they receive live feedback based on how they're playing along several scales, and that data is gathered and sent to me as a teacher, which has greatly improved my planning time as well, which has further helped my instructional time to be able to make sure that, I'm sucking up every minute of that I get. So I believe you can see it. Hopefully everyone can see it right now. This is actually the shop right now. So when kids come into my classroom, let's say a second grade class comes in, they pull up Songcraft, they have this unique room that's theirs, that's customizable. There's sort of an in-app currency they can earn through playing songs, and they can spend that on things in their home. When we are in class session together, we head to class and the students pull up the song that they are working on together as an ensemble. Then they have access to just the pitches that they need for this particular song. There is a massive lag right now, so I'm not going to demonstrate playing a song because it would look a little ridiculous, and I'm sure everything would be a couple seconds behind. But basically, there is that ability for them to play as an ensemble, and then playing individually looks more like this. They pull up the song, it's adaptive for their skill set. Ongoing iterations of this program will be more highly adapted. I want to speak a little bit to the traction I've had on this project. So my students who use this coming back the second half of the 2021-2022 school year not only exceeded, they overcame their learning loss from COVID, but were actually playing songs and demonstrating better mastery of music theory above, even a grade level above where they had been. And it was just simply because they were playing this. Some students for hours outside of school and experiencing flow and actually really enjoying getting some intrinsic motivation out of just playing music and reading it. That brought me to UNC for a grad program. I've been completing the Masters of Educational Innovation, Technology, and Entrepreneurship course at UNC. And this past spring, I was actually selected for an NC IDEA grant, micro grant for $10,000 towards building this thing out, which I've employed to contracting some better devs to take my very disgusting code and make it more industry standard. I'm also here because I have been accepted into the semifinal round of a National Science Foundation grant process known as the Vital Prize. And I can't even remember the acronym, but it's about learning innovative tools. And so we started over, I think, 300 people in that process, and I'm down to one of 54, and I earned $20,000, again, to sort of further build out this prototype of mine. And this is an ongoing grant process. So over the next 3 weeks, I'll work with a teacher mentor out in Arizona to further prototype, try to get this thing into some other schools to potentially pilot it and see how it works in various systems under various circumstances. And hopefully, if I'm one of the top 18, we'll be able to earn $50,000 and have a chance to be a finalist to earn significantly more than that. So thank you very much for your time. If you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to have you in the classroom so you can kind of see it in real life. But thank you so much for your time.
So thanks for letting us bring our episode of Shark Tank here to the board meeting tonight, and we'll try to keep the positive energy going.
Wow.
And that's our recognition.
I'd like to go to the classroom and see all of that. That's just fascinating. So thank you very much. Okay, we will move to agenda adoption, and I would, did you say something? Oh, okay, I thought you were stopping me. We will move to agenda adoption, and I would like to ask for a motion to adjust the agenda just for a statement that I would like to read to everyone. So if the board would grant me that, then I will do that before we go into public comment. But if we could have a motion that I read that comment,
I move
please.
that we adopt the agenda with the chair motion at the beginning.
Second.
Okay? Thank you. Mr. Atherton is on the computer tonight, Zoom with us tonight, so that was Mr. Atherton. All in favor? Aye. Aye, okay, thank you very much. Okay, at this time, I will make that comment, and then Mr. Richmond will read the public comment section. Okay. All right. On behalf of the Orange County Board of Education, I would like to make a statement with regard to action taken by the North Carolina State Legislature late last week. The North Carolina House and Senate enacted legislation that has caused a great deal of concern and anxiety for our LGBTQIA students, families, and for our school district and for this board. As a result, we want you to know and understand that the Orange County Board remains fully and unequivocally committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion for every student, parent, guardian, teacher, staff member, and volunteer that is a part of our school system. We remain focused on creating a school environment where everyone feels safe and included and are always welcomed within our buildings. We respect and value our LGBTQIA students, staff, and families, and we will continue to work to provide a secure and supportive school environment. We strongly feel that every student deserves a caring, nurturing school experience built on trusting relationships with teachers and staff. The Orange County Board of Education and Orange County School System welcome all students and families to our buildings. The Orange County Board of Education will continue our commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion, and safety for each of our students, our families, and our staff. And I'm going to ask Mr. Smith if he will post this on our webpage. I have sent him a copy of it, and if he will post that, then everyone who is not here tonight and not listening will be able to see that. Thank you all for allowing me to do that. Mr. Richmond.
Now for public comment. The Board of Education welcomes public comments, which are governed by Board Policy 2310 and North Carolina General Statute 143-318.17. A person wishing to address the board must sign up prior to the board's regular meeting. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes. When the 3 minutes end, the speaker must stop speaking immediately. Yielding time to another speaker will not be permitted. All public comments should be civil and non-disruptive. Per policy, board members will listen carefully, but will not respond to speakers. Also remember, when you come up to speak, speak slowly and clearly for the interpreters so they can interpret what you're saying to the community. Thank you. First up, we have Nina Morley Day.
Good evening. I know most of you know me. I am Nina Morley Day. I proudly taught in the North Carolina Public Schools for 36 and a half years. All but 2 of those years were here at the mighty Orange High School. And as Matt Hamlin, an amazing former OHS faculty member, always said, once a Panther, always a Panther. I'm here tonight to make sure that you know that I fully support public education. I want you to know that I understand the process of leading a school system is difficult and often messy. Many days, it's a thankless job to be on the school board. These are undoubtedly some of those thankless days. Recently, I've joined the Public Schools Strong Group through Heal Together North Carolina because I strongly support their mission that students deserve honest, accurate, safe, equitable, and fully funded public schools. As citizens of our county and state, we cannot stand by while laws and policies that harm our public schools, students, and staff are created. I urge you to continue to work for all students in our schools. As a school system, we are making progress, but there's still much work to be done. This work needs to go beyond the surface changes, and it must include the hard work of changing mindsets and how our school environment feels for each student. Real change is never going to happen overnight, and it is going to require a consistent effort from many tenacious people working together. Please remember that many people in our community believe that our Orange County public schools are doing a great job. For example, I want to thank you for the individual and corporate support and recognition that you've provided to the various levels of our FIRST Robotics program. As a member of that community and as a science teacher, I will always continue to advocate for a strong STEM and STEAM programs in our school. Please continue to help us provide opportunities for our students to learn technical and non-technical skills, develop as leaders as they work together with many different people to solve complex problems. Finally, it's essential during these difficult times that all of us look beyond the rhetoric and the positioning that's being done to find the key areas where we can all agree on in order to move forward. It's important to always remember the question should always be, what is best for our students? And how can we as adults work to make that happen? Part of my solution is always going to be that each student deserves honest, accurate, safe, equitable, and fully funded public schools. Thank you so much for your support and for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you.
Next, we have Hillary McKenzie.
Last week, the North Carolina General Assembly overrode the governor's veto of several bills that actively harm children and families and staff members of this and every district in North Carolina. I applaud leadership from the Chapel Hill Carrboro City School Board for making a prompt statement that they stand unequivocally with their LGBTQ community. Waiting until tonight was too long. At last week's meeting, the first public comment since Atherton, Hauser, Richmond, and Purcell bought out Dr. Felder's contract, the groups and people who support them showed up to talk about unity, while some also delivered anti-LGBTQ messages. Conservative groups like Friends of Orange County Schools and Moms for Liberty support the board majority of 4 and have strong ties to alt-right conservative groups like the North Carolina Values Coalition and the Ed First Alliance. If you are taking money and endorsements from groups who promote anti-LGBTQ rhetoric, you send a message that these are also your values. You may think, Ms. Hauser, that by recently switching your political affiliation to the Democratic Party, that you will be able to fool people in the upcoming election. But we see you for exactly who you are. Your personal campaign contribution in 2022 to a North Carolina Values Coalition trained candidate for this board is very concerning. Equally concerning is that you aren't honest enough to stand behind your actual political beliefs and party. Please stop hiding and start telling the truth. You didn't support Dr. Felder, your micromanagement and disrespect palpable in your interactions with her. You associate with alt-right organizations who do not support the rights of every child in this district. You are not a Democrat. You said your priority on this board was academics, but then you ousted a superintendent who was making incredible academic strides with our students. Be honest. You said you were worried about the budget and started rumors about financial indiscretions, but when 2 audits showed no wrongdoing on behalf of Dr. Felder, you still spent $200,000 out of the fund balance you claimed to be worried about to buy out her contract. Be honest. It's one thing to just not like Dr. Felder and want her gone. It's one thing to be against steady progress of equity work in OCS. It's one thing to have conservative values. But just be honest about what exactly it is you stand for. If you, Ms. Hauser, and anyone else in this room want to work to better the lives of every child in this district, with all of the intentional and difficult work that comes with that, we should all welcome that kind of collaboration and respectful discourse. But when people only call for unity around leaders and issues they support, then they demonstrate exactly why justice for all of our children is so important.
Next is Wendy Padilla.
Hello, everyone. It's my first time here. My name is Wendy Padilla. I've been residing in Hillsborough for the past 5 years. I have formerly worked in the public school system. I'm here as an advocate for the community. I'm also a member of the NAACP. I'm here to express my concern on where the public school system is headed. I believe that all children have the right to an equal, equitable, inclusive, and safe environment to learn. Again, I believe that all children have the right to an equal, equitable, inclusive, and safe environment to learn. I am wondering why the Orange County School Board is not abiding by these basic, simple principles. I am wondering if the school board does not have any concern about our future. Whatever happened to equality and justice for all? Because this is an injustice. In addition to losing the superintendent that supported equality, equity, inclusiveness, in a safe environment, it is an injustice. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Next, we have Stacy Sewell.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Stacy Sewell. My son Sam went to New Hope Elementary, Standback, and Cedar Ridge. So I'm a former parent in this district. I'm here tonight because I came last week for the first time in a long time, and I listened to the people who were speaking, and they talked about unity. They talked a lot about unity, but all I heard from them was this fear, this palpable fear of anyone who wasn't quite like them. And they said things, they said they wanted to focus on reading and writing and arithmetic and just keep the focus on the kids, And one of the examples they gave was of a rainbow flag on the cover of a yearbook, which somehow violated the focus on the kids in the mind of this particular speaker. And I thought a lot about that in the time since that meeting. And I thought about my son, who has 2 moms and who went through Orange County schools, being welcomed, honestly, we always felt welcomed as families. And things like that rainbow flag, in my point of view, are a focus on the kids, because the kids need to feel like their families are welcome here. Not just white families, not just straight families, but all families. And it just feels very disingenuous to talk about unity, but then to only have a certain type of family in mind that's welcome, you know? And then when you see things like the recent laws coming from the state, it really makes one think that a school board will have to put their actions where their statements are, as far as supporting teachers. If a teacher acts in support of a family, maybe all the students are drawing pictures of their family, and one draws a picture with two moms, and a kid says, "What's that about?" And the mom answers, or the teacher answers the question. Technically, they've violated the law. How much support will the board be giving? You know what I'm saying? Like, there could be legal expenses. There could be a need to support those teachers. And the kids will appreciate it. The kids whose families you are supporting and the kids who you are welcoming. Thank you.
Next is Heather Redding.
Good evening. My name is Heather Redding, and I'm here as a community member, parent, public school advocate, and ally. With the start of the new school year right around the corner, kids should be returning to the classroom with the typical feelings of any student: excitement, nervousness, etc. But this year, many students are returning knowing that they have been let down by those with power in our state. As you well know, last week, the General Assembly waged war on public education, targeting some of the most vulnerable students and bowing down to the right wing's ongoing assault on equity. With the passage of the Parents' Bill of Rights, the ban on trans athletes from participating in school sports, the criminalizing of gender-affirming care for minors, many students will be starting the new school year in a place of deep hurt, fear, betrayal, and uncertainty. Many are starting school not knowing if the classroom will be a place of safety from bigotry, because the door has been opened and the red carpet unrolled to welcome in extremist groups like Moms for Liberty. Groups whom will undoubtedly use the Parents' Bill of Rights to gut public school curriculum of any content that doesn't align with their right-wing, America First, anti-DEI agenda. It's not just students being harmed. There are now targets on the backs of superintendents, librarians, equity leaders, and any educator who dare advocate for equity and diversity. And yet, crickets from the Orange County School Board until tonight, as right-wing extremists turn back the clock, stripping away the progress that civil rights leaders, LGBTQ+ leaders, education advocates, and others have made in the fight for access to an equitable educational environment for all students. You must not remain silent or offer lukewarm statements of support. Silence sends a message to kids and educators that neutrality is acceptable in the face of bigotry. Silence invites more extremism in the days to come. Silence invites more legislation that, if we are to learn anything from Florida, will lead to the banning of courses like African American Studies and AP Psychology in our public schools. Silence indicates approval. Our Black, Brown, Indigenous, immigrant, LGBTQ+, disabled, and historically oppressed students deserve to be seen and supported exactly right now. They deserve to know that you're on their side, that you're advocating for their safety and well-being, and that as their access to an equitable and inclusive education is being legally stripped away, you have their best interests in mind, not your political careers. I urge you to speak out louder and offer tangible resources to students and educators impacted by these new laws. To the few of you who have already spoken up as individuals, thank you for your statements. To those who haven't made individual public statements, the community expects more of you. Either speak up or get out of education.
Next is Megan Darrow.
Good evening, Board and Dr. Merrill. Thank you for taking public comment. I want to express my concern about the recent developments in the North Carolina General Assembly that make North Carolina a less welcoming place for LGBTQ+ individuals. As a parent of an Orange County School student and a community member, I want to show my support for LGBTQ+ individuals in our community. Every student, staff member deserves a respectful and accepting environment where they feel safe and valued for who they are. Our LGBTQ+ students and staff are an important part of our community, and these new laws lead to isolation and marginalization. Therefore, I'm asking the Orange County Schools Board of Education to honor their commitment to these individuals and those that support them. I'm asking that all members of this board support this community with more than just a statement. A statement given by Board Chair Purcell, a Board of Education member, on record as wanting to remove LGBTQ+ materials from the school libraries. It rings hollow and insincere. Your actions and inactions speak volumes to your commitment. By upholding and creating a policy that truly supports LGBTQ+ students and staff, you can demonstrate your commitment and uphold important Orange County community values. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Michael Johnson.
Good evening, Chair Purcell, Vice Chair Richmond, and the members of the board. Thank you for your service. I will start by providing context before getting into the point or the meat of my comments. My name is Michael Johnson, and I am a 1992 graduate of Orange High School. I am the father of 2 children who currently attend Orange County Public Schools, one of whom has exceptional needs. My family has lived in Orange County for literally centuries. I descend from enslaved people who worked on plantations within a few minutes' drive from here. My Taurian ancestors, upon receiving their freedom, were instrumental in the founding of Latticeville Grove Missionary Baptist Church in Hurdle Mills. My Wilson ancestors did the same for Mount Bright Missionary Baptist Church here in Hillsborough. I am in some way or another related to everyone from Hillsborough. My beautiful Black wife, who by the way wears natural hair, and I recently celebrated our 16th wedding anniversary. We are both proud alumni of historically Black universities. I currently serve as the 2nd vice president of my alma mater's National Alumni Association. And finally, I am honored to be a member of Friends of Orange County Schools. I'm here tonight to push back on the false narrative that we are some fringe, right-wing, white supremacist group. We are simply a group of concerned parents and citizens who seek to ensure Orange County students receive a high-quality education that prepares them for success in their future endeavors, whether that be immediate entry into the workforce, attending trade school, or going on to a 4-year college. Our membership spans multiple ethnicities, age groups, and political ideologies. Are some of us conservative? Yes. Are some of us liberal? You betcha. And while we may not always agree on everything, we do agree that a stellar school system makes for a stellar community overall. As I look at the people sitting in front of me, I, along with Friends of Orange County Schools, celebrate the fact that you are under the capable female leadership of Chair Purcell, that you have highly respected Black members in Vice Chair Richmond and Board Member Dr. Moore, that a Jewish woman like Board Member Hauser has a say in making decisions on behalf of our students and teachers. We celebrate not only their ethnic diversity, but also their diversity of thought. However, this diversity must not, and this is my personal gripe, come at the expense of Black students who too often have a mindset of oppression projected on them from a small group of people with a savior complex and too much time on their hands. To Dr. Merrill, I say welcome. Friends of Orange County Schools looks forward to partnering with you and the board to make Orange County Public Schools a beacon of light for years to come.
Thank you.
Next, we have Lynn Carswell.
Good evening. My name is Lynn Carswell, but I'm here to share the words of an Orange County School rising 9th grade student in response to new state legislation passed this week. They say, "These laws that are being put into place have been more than overwhelmingly upsetting. My friends and I had a safe space with our favorite teacher. If these laws are enforced, that's gone. We had somebody, we had some places that we actually felt heard. Now that's gone. These laws are not at all protecting anybody. They're not helping anyone. They're not really what they claim to be. They're only made to put children in danger. Children. Why does our government try to control what our children do with their lives? We, the LGBTQ+ youth of North Carolina, are scared. We're scared to get up in the morning, scared to leave our homes, scared to go to school, scared to go to work, scared. Because when laws like this get supported by people who should be caring for us, protecting us, leading us, how else are we supposed to feel about those within 10 feet of us? I thank this student for sharing these words.
Thank you.
Please excuse me if I mispronounce your last name. Next, we have Kate Faherty. All right, sorry.
Good evening. I'm Kate Faherty. Your pronunciation is fine. I'm a proud parent of two young men who went through Orange County schools and in fact attended Hillsborough Elementary. And I'm so proud and thrilled to see how vibrant and innovative and effective that school remains. And I'm just say, go Dolphins, because my older son walked into that school the first day it opened, and I owe them a lot. But I wanted to be here today because I support the public schools strongly. And I've also got more comments from another rising ninth grade student that I have agreed to read. So this is from this student. Out of every anti-LGBTQ plus law passed, one word comes to mind that fits all of them: suppression. These students have been harassed and bullied in school for just being who they are. All of these laws that are being put into place are just fueling that harassment and bullying. The laws are just making us feel less and less like human beings and more like objects that you can just do whatever you want with. Everyone says that times have changed and everyone is accepted now. But if that were the case, why are all these laws being made solely to suppress and silence us? Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Next is Kelly Suttles.
Good evening. I came here tonight to ask the board to issue a statement to reassure students, families, and teachers that they will still be safe at school and that these laws will not harm, these recent laws that obviously everyone's been talking about this evening, that these laws will not harm or exclude anyone in our schools. I thank you for making that statement tonight. I too wish it had come sooner, but I still appreciate that you've done that. However, I think that, as another speaker mentioned about the ambiguity of these laws, teachers are being put in a really impossible situation. It's just going to be very difficult as to what they can and can't say in their classroom, just discussing families with children. I mean, it's very basic, and LGBTQIA folks are part of our community. They are our families, our school families. You know, I mean, they're just part of our community. And so for teachers to not be able to talk about families are just, that's very hard. So I think you're going to need to make a little bit more, you're going to have to go a little further in your statement and make teachers understand how supported they are to continue policies that you already have here. So since I don't need to really give my statement urging you to make this statement, I just want to reiterate what Nina said at the beginning. The group that I'm part of, Public School Strong, I think that a majority of parents really love their public schools, love the schools their children attend. I know I really like Orange County schools and the school my children go to, and so I really think that we're the majority. So let's get back to the work of honest, accurate, safe, equitable, and fully funded public schools. Manufactured controversies are just that, so we don't need to focus on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Matt Hughes.
Good evening, Chair Purcell, Vice Chair Richmond, and members of the board. While many of you know me and that I'm Matt Hughes, and I serve as the Mayor Pro Tem for the town of Hillsborough, I'm speaking today in my capacity as president of the Northern Orange NAACP and as a proud 2009 graduate of Cedar Ridge High School, where I also served as the student body president. Many of my NAACP members are concerned about the direction of the school system since the departure of Dr. Monique Felder. While Dr. Merrill, I've heard, has many great qualities as a public school leader, the departure of his predecessor has shaken the confidence of many of my members. As an elected official, I'm routinely asked about what's going on in our schools by folks not only in the community, but also around the region, and they are bewildered and seeking answers. And I understand what they're saying. When the legislature overrode the governor's vetoes last week regarding so-called parental rights, this board as a group was silent until this evening. No mention of the overreach into the lives of our students, no mention of protecting the marginalized, no mention of the Republican supermajority failing to enact a budget that pays our teachers what they're worth, or expanding Medicaid that would benefit so many of our students and families in our community. 14 years ago, as an LGBTQ student, I would have been looking to y'all to have my back and speak out loudly and in real time at a dark and tumultuous time in public education in our state. As a proud graduate of our schools, I know we can do better. Our students deserve better. And I truly believe that all of you, each of you ran because you want what's best for our students. And therefore, let's not fall on the wrong side of history, and let's rise to the occasion and do the right thing for this district when it comes to safety, equity, and opportunity. And I hope you can rise to that same school mission statement we said every morning at Central Elementary when Sheila McDonald was our principal, that stuck with me well over 20 years later, that every child will attain academic excellence and a safe and supportive environment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Sarah Burt Timmel.
Please forgive me, it's my very first time getting up in front of speaking in front of a large group other than spoken word. Good evening. First, I would like to thank all of our school board members, staff, and teachers for their hard work and commitment to our schools and community. I appreciate the opportunity to speak this evening as well. Our future is in the hands of our children in the community. Though I am not a parent nor a grandparent of children currently in our school system, I can promise I care deeply and have been extremely active for our children in the past. Not only are my grown children products of Orange County Schools, I have been an active advocate for years, not only for my own children, but for many others as well. My advocacy has extended to those who struggled academically on an IEP or an ESL, or perhaps even those identified as gifted. I have kept an open door for those who have struggled, were bullied, suffered from depression, or simply just wanted to talk. I have lived in Hillsborough most recently since 2002, am a former Boy Scout leader in Orange County, a former band booster mom at Orange Middle School, formerly Stanford, a former soccer manager for Triangle United, a former diving team chauffeur, whatever, I'll keep going, all while working full-time as a paralegal. My point is that I care very much about all of our children, regardless of race, ethnicity, gender, economic background, or sexual orientation, as well as their rights. I can promise you, one must be in order to do our children. I can promise you one must be in order to do our children and world justice. I also understand that I and my children had a better chance in our school systems because of systemic racism and privilege. It's a hard pill to swallow, but it's true. Though I have been on my own since I was 18 years of age, worked hard my entire life, I had privileges others did not have, and my time's about ready to run out, so I'm going to go to the end. In conclusion, this old woman of 64 who considers herself somewhat knowledgeable and experienced on these levels strongly encourages equity training for staff and students combined with inclusion in our schools. Please don't stop teaching to our children's differing abilities, but please teach equity and true history. Thank you. I skipped the whole paragraph. Forgive me, I'm not a speaker.
Next is Lori Tepper.
Good evening, board members and Dr. Merrill. It's time for change. Change for new leadership, for a new season, for incoming students, teachers, and staff, and change in new laws. Some people look forward to change and some people avoid it at all costs. My hope is that you are looking ahead to these changes through a positive lens. I'm here tonight to encourage you to adapt your current policy to adhere to the Parents' Bill of Rights in North Carolina that was recently passed and is effective immediately. Under the current gender support guidelines, the following changes need to take place. Regarding pronouns, OCS policy states students are not required to obtain parental consent as a prerequisite to being addressed by the name and pronoun they select that corresponds to their gender identity. NC state law states, prior to any changes in the name or pronoun used for a student in school records or by school personnel, notice to the parent of the change is required. Regarding parental involvement, OCS policy states, in some cases, transgender students may not want their parents to know about their transgender status. The school principal or their designee should speak with the student first to ascertain concerns the student may have, what support may be needed to keep that student safe at school, and how to involve the student's parents, if at all. Staff should be mindful that parents of minor children have rights under FERPA to inspect records maintained by the school that are related to their children. If a student's parent does not know or is not supportive, it may be preferable to not complete the gender support plan. NC state law states employees are required to encourage a child to discuss issues related to the child's well-being with his or her parent, or facilitate discussion of the issue with the child's parents. An employee of the state who attempts to encourage or coerce a child to withhold information from his or her parent may be subject to disciplinary action. School personnel shall not discourage or prohibit parental notification of and involvement in critical decisions affecting a student's mental, emotional, physical health, or well-being. Regarding the Pride curriculum that was taught in May of this year, moving forward, the law prohibits that kind of teaching for grades K through 4. So not only do you need to make changes, you need to add policy and hold the teachers accountable. Mr. Atherton, as the head of a policy committee, we expect you to work with your colleagues to make the appropriate changes and additions to the OCS policy to conform to the state law without delay. I'm sure you know that this law includes remedies, including our right to bring action and attain injunctive relief if you don't make this right. And I just want to say one other thing, if I can. It would be very helpful if you scheduled quarterly town halls to dialogue with the public about the work that you're doing, how much money is being sent, as well as answering questions and where this money is being allocated. That would be a welcoming, positive change for transparency. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Danielle Price.
Good evening, Chair Purcell, Vice Chair Richmond, fellow board members, Dr. Merrill, district staff, and other community members. I am the mother of a sixth grader at Orange Middle School and a proud 2001 graduate of Orange High School. Last week I listened while community members spoke with such pride about her work with Hate Free Schools Coalition. But this past week has left my spirit unsettled and made me wonder How much of what we preach do we actually put into practice? I've seen and heard adults take blatant shots and make disparaging remarks at people, all while proclaiming to practice kindness and tolerance. But how does that work? Are we only tolerant of people whose thoughts and opinions echo our own? We ask our children to be free thinkers, yet we aren't. We ask them to stand up to bullying, yet some of the biggest bullies are sitting in this room. For the past 6 weeks, we found ourselves focused on the actions of adults. And I'm begging you to shift your focus to the issues that are plaguing our district and our students. Classroom teaching positions that have been vacant for 2+ years, widespread discipline problems, poor performing schools, service level disparities that vary drastically from school to school. And while it is beyond necessary for us to redistrict, without addressing our disparities with access to resources, that's only going to further mask our problem rather than fix them. So how are we working to prioritize meeting the needs of our students, our families, our amazing educators, and our admins? Everyone sitting here today took an oath of service. And I ask that as you reflect on that oath, that you remember your charge is to serve everyone, not just the people who voted for you. Because I'm sure that we can all agree that our children deserve better than what they're getting and what they're seeing from us.
Thank you.
Next is Latondra Strong.
Hello, board members, how are you? I'm here today to talk about a lot of things, and I got some things written down. But I feel like it's important to say something. The whole point of diversity, equity, and inclusion, you don't have to have a long history and a track record to be valued. That just a mom could come up and talk to you and be valued. That I don't have to have a bunch of letters behind my name, and that you would listen to me. That what my concerns for my children would be heard and wouldn't fall on deaf ears. That if I don't adopt to a Confederacy Christianity, that you would still listen to me. That's the point of hate-free schools. That's why hate-free schools got started. So, because equity has been on my heart for a long time now, here are the things that I would propose. That we keep our equity policy, that we don't alter it, but that we strengthen it. That we follow the strategic plan that was left by Dr. Felder because it was working and we wanted to continue to work. That we protect Black principals who quite frankly feel under attack, and that we examine all the Black leadership that have left this district or come under attack by personnel issues in the last year. That we protect our LGBTQ students and families because they need us at a time like this. That we stop attacking our equity department, and that we that we call into question some of the ethical behavior that I see that is troubling by school board and by board members. I think you need to revisit what school board members should be doing and what should be left to the district and to teachers. I'm gonna save the last minute for something that's near and dear to my heart. I want to apologize to Tamara Matheson for what happened in this boardroom and the disrespect that was given her and the sharing of personnel issues in this boardroom. I want to apologize to Joyce Hatcher. I saw you. I saw you stand up and be disrespected by this board in ways that I haven't seen any person with any other race be disrespected. I want to talk to Lee Williams and tell you I'm sorry that people are telling lies about you, calling you a communist and a Marxist. You are a strong man. You have an education that supports the work that you do, and you're a Christian man that's a leader of a home with Christian values. I want to apologize to all the students and family that heard the nonsense that was shared in this community. It was hurtful, and we shouldn't thank people when they come up and say disparaging things to people in the audience. We should instead caution against it. Thank you.
Next is Gretchen Smith.
Good evening, Dr. Merrill and members of the board and community. I just wanted to first read this section because it's always enlightening to actually read the laws and not just people that are commenting about the laws. But this was brought up in question in an earlier comment. Age-appropriate instruction for grades kindergarten through fourth grade. Instruction on gender, identity, sexual activity, or sexuality shall not be included in the curriculum provided in grades kindergarten through fourth grade, regardless of whether the information is provided by school personnel or third parties. For the purposes of this section, curriculum includes a standard course of study and support materials, locally developed curriculum, supplemental instruction, and textbooks and other supplementary materials, but does not include responses to student-initiated questions, like about family, for instance. So in light of the commitment of Orange County Schools for every student, faculty, and staff to feel and be safe in the school district, I wanted to share here an alarming experience which was reported recently in the Assembly by Barry Yeoman on August 7th, earlier this month, concerning the Orange County Schools Chief Equity Officer. He was quoted as saying, one father, William said, called him 19 times in a single day. Do you think you're safe? The parent asked, do you think your family's safe? I have reckoned with this idea. This is a work I will die for, he said, which is the title of the article. There is no evidence available publicly that gives any indication that an investigation took place. Threatening the life of anyone is a serious crime, generally with serious consequences. A parent behaving this way undermines the opportunity and community discussion brought by all community members. Regardless of however many differences exist between anyone, Moms for Liberty denounces and calls for an extensive investigation of this behavior and for this parent to be accountable to the law for the threatening the life and the safety of Mr. Williams, the Chief Equity Officer. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Cindy Schreiner. Okay, thank you. Next is David Ogden.
A few days ago, I went to see a high school tennis match. This match was a little different than any I've seen before. It was last Wednesday. It was 91 degrees outside. Most of the girls were wearing standard tennis shorts and tank tops. However, a few of them were dressed in full-length burqas. Their attire was completely black, and it covered them from ankles to wrists to their neck and over their head. My first thought was, wow, that must be difficult playing in those dresses in this heat. As I thought about it more, I started to wonder, what kind of creep would I have to be to approach one of those girls and say, hey there, you look a little hot in that burqa. You know you can put something more comfortable on, right? Don't worry, I won't tell your parents. And you can put the burqa back on before you go home so that you won't get in trouble. You may be wondering, does my own teenage daughter wear a burqa? No. Do I agree that girls should keep themselves covered that way? No. Does our American society at large agree with that type of dress for girls? No. Does anyone, regardless of their position, have the right to interject between those girls and their parents on this matter? What kind of person would I have to be when I see parenting I disagree with to approach the child and convince them I am their ally and that I'm going to help them do things that their parents can't help them with? What kind of misguided thinking could allow me to believe that I have more love or insight or compassion or intelligence or understanding or morality than the fathers of these girls? Our gender support policy authorizes staff in our schools to engage with a child about their sexuality and to avoid keeping written records so that parents do not become aware of what school staff are doing with their child. We've all seen how this policy has attracted and emboldened adults in our district who are indulgently gratified by becoming allies and co-conspirators with children regarding their sexuality. Every LGBTQ+ child deserves dignity, kindness, and a safe place in our community. but our community has so-called allies who are perpetrating emotional abuse against these children. I can't think of a more sinister way to crush a child's sense of security or identity than to leverage your position of trust to undermine that child's relationship with their own parent. This policy and these types of actions are harmful for LGBTQ children and their families. The mindsets they promote are bad for every child, and they are toxic in our community. Board members, I appreciate your commitment to every student, including LGBTQ students. I know you are under immense pressure to give in to the will of one mob or the other. I hope you will continue your course to rise above this pressure and focus on the needs of every child. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lastly, we have Bella Morelli.
Hello, and thank you for your time tonight. My name is Bella, and I am a sophomore at Orange County Schools. And today I'll be sharing the words from an Orange County Schools rising 9th grade student in response to new state legislation passed last week. Confining, stupid, unbelievable, bad, disappointing, scary, exhausting, heartbreaking, aggravating, upsetting, dehumanizing, unfair. These are some of the many words used by LGBTQ youth describing the laws. Words to describe the mental pain they are feeling. Words they use to even grasp the feeling of when supposedly going to a safe space that'll never be safe. Words they have to feel each day when waking up. The many words they have to think and feel each second, each minute, each hour, each day, every month, every season, and every single year. I wonder if I'm going to be okay. Am I valid? I was afraid of not being taken seriously. Am I going to be harassed? Why am I still here? I just want you to love me. Why do you hate me for being who I am? Am I going to make it to school okay? These are the phrases being released from our hearts and our minds, the phrases that put a shock through our bones and our skin. We are still children, we are still human. Oh, but you don't understand. You're a child, you're too young, you don't know what's good for you. But I'm more than just a child you get to sculpt like clay. I'm not just a robot you can program with your ways. I will always be human. Oh, but you're still living, you're still okay. These things made you stronger, they made you okay. You were able to overcome this. Why are you making such a big deal? The only thing that should have been making me okay was the milk from my bones and my brain, not my pain and that of others being weighed on my shoulders, not the pain of wondering if I'll be bullied in school, not the pain of being outed to ones who seek me harm, not the pain or realizing that the world will never change. I didn't need hate, all I needed was comfort. So I beg and I plead before it's too late. Love your children, love yourself, accept who you are, accept who others are, change the laws, change the ways of the world before our world comes into erupting flames, ready to destroy much more than the children and the people you so much fear. I would like to thank the student for sharing their thoughts, and I would like to thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And that concludes our public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Richmond. Thank you again to everyone who came and spoke and brings their thoughts, ideas, opinions. As I said last week, we need to hear, we want to hear what you have to say, and I appreciate it. We will now move to approving the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, consent agenda is approved. We move into our information on Title I and grants, I believe. Dr. Merrill.
Good evening, Chairman Purcell, Vice Chair Mr. Richmond, welcome, and board members. And good evening, Dr. Merrill. This evening, I'm delighted to have Ms. Wagner present our Title I budget request which will allow her to, the school system to apply for the grant that releases Title I funds. If you recall, back in June, she presented the proposed Title I plan, given what was expected funds, how many schools we would support, and the amount. She will provide an update to that proposal. And as we get the final dollar, we'll come back and share that information with you as well. Also, if you recall, around October of last year, we presented the Title I plan. And so after submitting, if we get approval to request or submit the application, then we will come back and present you with the Title I plan.
Good evening, Chair Purcell, board members, and Dr. Merrill. As Dr. Green stated, I am here tonight to give you an update from the June 1st presentation that we presented based off preliminary allotments. The good news is we are planning allotments a little bit higher than what we anticipated in June, and we certainly hope that when they get a budget passed for us, it'll be even higher. So funds are allocated for a variety of reasons to our Title I schools. Our Title I schools, this money is used to help support them to provide resources above and beyond what all the other schools have. Schools can choose to use these funds in a variety of ways, but funds have to be aligned to their school improvement plan and be rooted in stakeholder feedback and a data-informed need. And one of the documents that I've created for them this year for a planning document is that they're tracking that data throughout the year so that we can see, are we getting the feedback and the return for our investment with those funds that are being spent. For our Title I school allocations, we've had a few changes since last June as we talked about Pathways Elementary coming on as a Title I school this year. And also in the recent weeks, we've discovered that Partnership Academy will also be brought on. The reason that Partnership Academy is being brought on, although we only serve elementary band right now, is that the state requires us to serve any school that is over 75% free and reduced lunch. So I've been in very close contact with Stan over the past few weeks, getting prepared for that. So the allocations that you see there are our school allocations. This is an increase of approximately $250,000 in direct school allotments from last year's budget. A portion of our carryover funds were used to increase school allocations within the allowable parameters from Title I guidelines. Allotments to schools are determined by rank order, meaning that the highest poverty percentage is served first, and then we go down from there. For this school year, we identified only 2 poverty bands, which is a change from last year. We had 3 different poverty bands, but because of the increase in our free and reduced lunch numbers, we've seen our bands are getting closer and closer together. In the highest poverty band, the free and reduced percentages range from 73 to 80%. Partnership Academy, Central, New Hope, and Eflin Cheeks are all in this highest band. In the lower poverty band, the free and reduced lunch numbers range from 60 to 61%, so they're very close together. Our minimum per pupil allotment, we determine that by dividing the total amount left to allot to schools by our number of free and reduced lunch eligible students in the district at all schools. That would have been $228 for this year. Our lowest per pupil allotment is $542 for our lowest band. New Hope, Eflin, and Grady Brown saw an increase in their planning allocations, $53,000, $80,000, and $3,000 respectively. And CES, Central, has a decrease of approximately $18,000 from last year. Last year, Central was served in Tier 3, the highest poverty percentage, and they were the only school served in that highest poverty percentage. New Hope and Eflin were each served in Tier 2, and Grady Brown was served in the lowest band, so that means they got the lowest per pupil allotment. And as you've seen with our growing numbers, Partnership, Central, New Hope, and Eflin Cheeks are all served in the highest band this year since their percentages are so closely grouped together, allowing them $675 per pupil. And our Pathways and Grady Brown are served in Tier 2, which allots them $542 per pupil. Our district set-asides, we are permitted under Title I guidelines to set aside money at the district for the reasons that are presented here on the slide, for private schools, for parent and family engagement, professional learning, administration, pre-K, and district initiatives. This year, we've planned for the following set-asides. The total allocation for 23-24 is approximately $1.1 million. That is a decrease of 12% from last year, which was approximately $1.3 million. Although our numbers rose, our funds did not. And we also have a carryover funds of approximately $800,000. A portion of carryover funds was added to school allocations directly to Title I schools. Including pre-K, the total amount for school allocations is approximately $1.3 million. This leaves approximately $735,000 left for district set-asides. This amount does include a large portion of carryover funds. So what we have set aside at the district is a large portion from our carryover. For our administrative cost, there is a max of 12% of this year's allotment. We can't go over that. For this year, a portion of my salary and indirect costs are budgeted from that category. So 83% of my salary, and then our indirect costs are budgeted from there. The parent and family engagement amount is in addition to what has been allocated to individual schools. It's so about $5,800, and we've got about $19,000 allocated directly to schools so that they can increase their parent participation and partner with their parents. The funds that we have set aside at the district level for parent and family engagement will be used for district Title I family activities and events that we've been working to start planning. We haven't got those all figured out yet, but as soon as we do, we will certainly update you. Included within district-wide instructional initiatives are the following. One is our support for CSI and TSI schools as outlined in the June 1st Budget and Capital Needs Committee of the whole. And that's about $470,000 that we have set aside to support our CSI and TSI schools. Of the remaining $100,000, funds will be used for 40% of their salary for our district math facilitator, and then other district-wide support for Title I schools. So a big change from last year is that we have only 2 salaries that are coming out of our district set-asides, not including pre-K. We've got them as a lump sum by themselves, is the 83% of the federal programs director, and then 40% math facilitator are what's coming from the district set-asides. The rest are going to be directly in support of schools. Do I have any questions?
Sarah? Thank you so much for this presentation. And so I think I just have a couple of clarifying questions. One is, I understand that, so if I get this right, we increased the amount of Title I spending we're doing this year by using some carryover funding, but actually the amount we've received from the federal government, or we're going to receive from the federal government, is going to decrease by 12%.
Yes.
So we're making up that 12% and then spending some additional percent on top of that.
Yes.
Are we expecting then to need to cut back next year? Like, I guess I'm curious about why the decrease in Title I funds, and then also, are we going to need to like shrink some stuff a year from now because we're spending all of the carryover funding?
If the allocations continue with the trend that we've seen, or it will be cut even more next year. We've had a lot of discussions about what we think that's going to look like with ESSER ending at the end of this year, but most likely we will have to scale back on what we're able to provide this year, next year, depending on what that ends up being.
And so is that like a federal government decision about just how much Title I funding to provide to schools, or why did it decrease by 12%? Did our number of qualifying students decrease by 12%?
No, our qualifying students actually increased by approximately 10%, but our allotment from the state decreased by quite a bit.
Okay.
That's a great question. I wish I knew the answer to that.
I don't want to like delve
myself.
real deep into that right now. We have a budget committee, but like maybe we could talk about it in budget or something, because I don't. Sure. That sounds foolish. Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Ms. Allen?
Yeah, I just thank you first for the transparency. This was a really wonderful presentation. Thank you so much. Can you just talk about the carryover and what exactly that is?
Sure. So in a normal year, you're permitted to carry over 15% of the previous year's allocation. And in fact, we're encouraged to do that, with not knowing when the budget will be passed, so that we have the funds here available to pay for our recurring costs, such as salaries and things like that. Due to COVID, and with the COVID relief monies, the ESSER 1, 2, and 3, the state and federal government have allowed us to carry over more than that 15%. So we've accumulated that money over these years throughout COVID. And so we are looking at a significant amount, about $800,000 of carryover funds now that we need to get spent down quickly. Because that's, the leeway with that is going to go away soon. From the state, so that they've said, you know, they're giving us this leeway because of ESSER, but as it fades out, then we're going to see the other also fade out, the permission to carry over more than 15%.
Just for clarifying, the carryover doesn't continue. It's going, it's going away too?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Carry over like 15%
Right,
this year,
we're allowed 15%.
which we will expect to do. Yep.
Above and beyond that, we're working to get all that spent down so that we don't have anything above 15%.
Thank you.
Are you budgeting that 15%? Like, is there sort of a category for like, we assume we're going to carry over 15%, or do you have to just?
No, I don't have that specifically laid out there. What we see is usually salary costs that we have budgeted for typically aren't quite as high, and we'll make it up through there.
Absorb some bits and pieces. Okay.
Ms. Dorr? I have a question about the number of qualifying students increasing. And since it's a percentage of our student population and we have been gradually losing some of our student population to charter schools, I'm wondering how much is an increase of numbers of students experiencing a greater poverty band, and how much is that we are losing wealthier students to charter schools? Is there any way that we track that?
I don't know the answer to that question, but I can certainly research that and bring that back to you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Very informative.
Thank you.
Okay. We have request for 2 part-time graduation coach positions at Partnership. Is that going to be?
There you go.
That's by Mr. Williams. And
Good
Mr.
morning,
Farrington.
and I'm going to call Dr. the great Stan Farrington also to the podium. So we're coming for you today. Partnership Academy has been labeled a CSI school, comprehensive school for an improvement. And they've been labeled this because of the graduation rate. Now, we all know that Partnership is not a standalone school, right? We receive students from Orange High School and from Cedar Ridge. And oftentimes students are coming to them below the credit levels that they need for graduation. And so Mr. Farrington and his team decided, you know, we're not going to accept this just to be the status quo. And so we think about how they were labeled that. It is any school that is under 67% in graduation rate. 67%. That's extremely low. Mr. Farrington and his staff do a great job of trying to get all the students the resources and the credits that they need, but they need some support. So because they're a CSI school, the government has decided that we're going to give them this pot of funds. So what we're asking for today, Mr. Farrington will speak more succinctly about what it looks like in his building, is for these 2 positions to be approved that come from the CSI funds. No local funds are needed. There's no pot of money we need from you all at all. We just need your support and approval that we can utilize these federal funds that have been allocated for his school because of being CSI to have these positions. The idea is that these part-time positions will also be effective in our local high schools and create partnerships with Durham Tech. The idea is that when we get a student in as best as we can, we accelerate the opportunity for graduation, keeping them close to track, so this way giving them an opportunity for a future that we all want them to have. So as an overall approach, this is what it will look like for our district. More succinctly, what it'll look like for a partnership. I'll turn it over to Dr. Farrington.
Thank you, sir.
Certainly. Good evening, Chair Purcell, Vice Chair Richmond, Board. Certainly, Dr. Merrill. Merrill, we appreciate this time, and I want to just reiterate one thing and then share a couple little things. The one thing is that, again, what we're asking for is not coming from any of the local funds of Orange County Schools. It is coming from federal government grant. The state of North Carolina, Department of Public Instruction has already viewed the proposal. I've sent it to them. They have agreed on it and think it's ingenious. As a matter of fact, the director of it has proposed it to other alternative schools, saying this is something you guys should do because it's probably going to help turn them around. Now, I believe it's going to turn us around. We have 3 years to get this done. The 22-23 school year was our first year. And what I have found is that it has been very difficult to spend money that's given to us to support students. So we want to support these students with the money that's been given. It's a strategic way to support PAHS, Partnership Academy High School students, while at Partnership Academy High School, as well as while they're partnering and attending school at Cedar Ridge High School or Orange High School. They take classes at our school as well as at the traditional high school. And so oftentimes when they go to the traditional high school, they may struggle, whether it's socially, whether it's academically, whether it's behaviorally. And these graduation coaches, again, part-time graduation coaches, federally funded graduation coaches, will be able to transition with them and assist with those struggles that they may have going from class to class or grade to grade at the high school. So we are asking for this support. If you look, you will see our graduation rate, and typically at most alternative schools, the graduation rate is down. This classification is CSI, Comprehensive Support and Improvement, LG. That's what it is. LG is low graduation rate. It follows traditionally alternative high schools because our population is so transient. When we first opened, it was strictly long-term suspended kids. And we've worked to get beyond that so that we can help students with whatever needs, whether it's mental health, whether it was behavioral, whether it was academic, emotional. But we're having a time getting kids who 18, 19, 17, who may come to us and haven't been in high school 3 years and have 4 credits. We're having a hard time getting those guys graduated, and we're going to need the help. We're going to need to be able to analyze what are the obstacles and how we can best get it done in a short amount of time so that we can get out of this 65%, 64% every single year because they're quitting school and not graduate or graduating in 7 years. We can do it, but we need this approved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions for us?
Anyone?
I just want to say, I know it's going to work. I know it's going to work. And I can attest to it. Before I guess this was thought of, I was a graduation coach because my son graduated from Partnership. But before then, he was at Cedar Ridge. I was there with him. So when I went to Partnership, I wanted to make sure I was there with him to make sure he succeeded and graduated. And that's what it takes. So I'm with you.
Okay. Yes, Ms. Smiley?
I appreciate this. I want to say if it takes 7 years, I know you know this, if it takes 7 years, it takes 7 years, as long as we get the kids, graduated. But I really appreciate this focus and effort. I think it's very promising. And there are a lot of things that I think the other high schools could learn from Partnership Academy. And, it may be if this is successful there, then maybe it can be successful at the other high schools. So I really look forward to seeing how this plays out.
We're gonna make it happen.
Yeah.
That's how it's gonna play out. We're gonna make it happen. Guaranteed.
To add in, I think it's also a good place as part to put in space. We've talked, I think individually, some of us around what it looks like to expand partnership. And, having a middle school option. And so granted, to see how this plays out, I think also confident, because some students, we're dispelling the myth that it's always long-term suspension or behavioral. Some kids just prefer a more private and intimate setting and, prefer to be in that space. And so I think affording that opportunity, that's true equity work, right? Affording students, so it's all students what they need, right? So I just want to put that plug out there. We'll shoot that shot later.
We do have a waiting list.
There is a waiting list.
There is a waiting list.
It's a nice thing to say
We're
right
full.
now. Yeah.
We're over full, and we have a
Well,
waiting
I'd like to add that being the one who's probably been here the longest involved with this, although Andre has been here as well, it's been an amazing process and an amazing journey that has been led by Mr. Stan Farrington. And I can honestly say that this school would not be where it is today if it was not for Stan Farrington, because I have watched him come along and move these children. Not only has he helped the children graduate, he has helped them through family crisis, through all kinds of things that high schools have, but may not have the time to work on, because he takes the time, and he and his staff, I can honestly say, are some of the best that I have ever seen. And I wholeheartedly support this. I think that it will be fantastic and another step in the life of partnership. And so, thank you, Stan, for all that you do.
Thank you, guys. Thank you. And again, it's changing lives. It's going to happen. It's going to happen.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So we,
So I have nothing to add to those comments, but except that I agree completely, and thank you. And with that, I'd like to move the recommendation.
Second?
any more discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right.
There you have it, sir. So I want to just ask. Now, that was the approval for the 2 part-time graduation coaches, not for the expansion of partnership. Is that correct?
Not yet. Not yet.
We'll talk about it. I need to back up just for a few seconds, because we were supposed to approve the Title I information and the grant details, and I overlooked that. And so I would like to ask if we have a motion to approve our Title I information and grant details.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And motion passes, and I'm sorry that I overlooked that, Dr. Green. All right. Now we move into the operations, research and educational laboratory information, better known as ORED.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair Purcell, Vice Chair Richmond, members of the board, Dr. Merrill. This evening, presenting from ORED would be Thomas Dudley and Brian Godfrey, and they'll be presenting our land use study for Orange County, which is the next progression in student reassignment as relates to school enrollment and future school enrollment forecast. So I'll turn things over to both Thomas and Brian at this time.
Thank you and good evening. Madam Chair, other members of the board, I'm Thomas Dudley with ORED, and I'm joined today by my colleague, Mr. Brian Godfrey. This evening, we will be presenting the results of the land use study that we conducted on behalf of Orange County Schools. And if you'll give me just a moment here, I will share my screen. Excellent. Okay. We'll begin with a brief reintroduction to our organization, because it has been several years since we worked together. From there, I'll be handing it over to my colleague, Mr. Godfrey, who will be discussing the land use study that he has led. From there, he'll hand it back over to me, and I'll be discussing the membership forecast, including the school level forecast, or what we call the added capacity table. From there, we'll have additional time for discussion as well as questions and answers. About ITRI, as we call it, The Institute for Transportation Research and Education is a university research extension, part of NC State University, and housed on NC State Centennial Campus in Raleigh. ITRI has been conducting research related to transportation in North Carolina for over 40 years. Our group is called ORED, as you said. We're an unbiased third-party evaluation research group that helps depoliticize the school planning process. And we do that through the tools that you see listed there. If you'd like to learn more about us, we have links to our site there. Now, the umbrella term for the services that we provide is called integrated planning for schools and communities. And here's the list of services that we provide and that we will continue to be providing for Orange County schools. These all fit under in the categories of sort of long-range facility planning or student assignment. And with that, I'll be handing it over to my colleague, Mr. Brian Godfrey, to discuss the land use study. Mr. Godfrey?
Good evening. So the foundation for our analysis is the land use study, which provides context for where growth is occurring and what drives that growth. And so to begin this process, we met with officials from the different municipalities around Orange County, from planning to economic development, transportation, and utilities. And we learned a lot, and we wanted to take this opportunity to thank all those who participated. Next slide, please. So Orange County is growing. And what are some of the drivers of that growth? One of the things we always look at are the transportation network. And this is something that allows folks to commute. It allows commerce to take place. And so one of the biggest things going on in Orange County right now, the I-40 widening project, that's going to reduce commute times. It's going to allow for distribution, manufacturing, and we're anticipating to see additional industrial development in the county, notably in Western Orange. The Buckhorn Economic Development District is an area that Mebane is growing into. Some may have heard of the Thermo Fisher Scientific plant that's going to be opening. And we can expect in the next decade to see additional life sciences and advanced manufacturing opening up in Orange County. Of course, you may have also heard of these big mega-site projects nearby, VinFast and Wolfspeed in Chatham County, both within commuting distance. We can expect to see these employment drivers leading to additional residential growth. So in Orange County, Hillsborough and Mebane are both growing. They're growing horizontally, and they're annexing additional properties that are what we call greenfield sites. Sites that were previously vacant are now becoming new neighborhoods, some single family, townhomes, apartments, etc. And so the county is growing. Overall, the water and sewer infrastructure is robust. There are some limitations to wastewater in some areas, but the ability of the municipalities to meet demand will be there. So next slide, please. So as part of the land use study, we work with the different officials to gather data as to where pending residential developments are found, how many units they contain, and estimates for their build-out timeline. So you can see here, this underlies our GIS spatial analysis, and growth is occurring across the county. We also separately have an inventory for Chapel Hill and Carrboro too. And so the result of the land use study is really that there's a wealth of land that can accommodate additional residential development, and we can expect to see that in the future. So with that, I'll hand it back to Mr. Dudley.
Thank you, Mr. Godfrey. So in addition to the residential development that you saw on the last slide that was collected as part of the land use study, there are several other factors which influence the membership forecast looking forward over the next 10 years. One of the major factors to consider is certainly resident live births and the history and projected numbers of these births, because this is of course important because a large share of these births become your kindergartners 5 years down the line. In a word, what I'm seeing here is stability looking back over the historic data, and that's what we anticipate for the future as well. We also like to take a look at what momentum you have occurring within the district in terms of membership, both at the district level and at the school level. Here you'll see your historical month one ADM information over the past 6 school years. We've seen a similar pattern here as to what we've seen in most districts across the state, which was a decline during COVID, as well as some slight recovery since. With that information, we will then move on to the first forecast slide. Here we have several pieces of information. Toward the left of the dotted line, we have your historical forecast, or your historical ADM information. This is just broken down by level: elementary, middle, and high. High school is the red, middle is yellow, and elementary is the blue on the top line there. So what you can see here over time, sort of zooming in metaphorically, you can see the decline in the elementary school size of the cohorts during COVID, and there's an echo of that that moves through the middle school several years later, and then an echo up to the high school years after that. That's due to the modeling that we're using here, and it very accurately has been shown to reflect the reality of, as these cohorts move up through the system, how they move from one school to the next and up through the grades accordingly. So big picture, also what I see here is stability, as well as modest growth at each of the 3 levels over the 10-year time horizon. Next, to look at that in more detail, we have the added capacity table. And what we like about these is they're a quick visual way to see where your capacity needs are and where they will be in the future. So sort of working our way from left to right, we have the name of the school, the capacity of the school, the membership of the school, and then 10 years worth of forecasts of what the membership is anticipated to be based on our work as part of the land use study. The coloring in the background is simply based on utilization. So that's the number of students divided by the capacity of the school for each one of these rows. And the legend for that coloring is down at the bottom, the utilization legend. Now, there's a lot of information here to digest, so I will pause on this. And in fact, this is our last slide for this evening. So I'd like to more formally ask if there's questions or if there's discussion on this topic.
Madam Chair, I have a question.
Yes, sir. Go ahead, Mr. Atherton.
So for these capacity numbers and these estimates, how do you account for charter schools that students can come from anywhere or go to anywhere? Have you modified your model to somehow account for the percent we see and assume that going forward? Or could you share some insight on how you account for that?
So the first comment that I need to make too is the presentation that you're seeing that's on the screen now is the correct presentation and reflects the changes in data that was established over the past several days. So the capacity numbers that you see here are correct. To get to your point about charter schools, so the way this model works is it's based on sort of mathematically, it's called cohort survival ratios. So looking at what ratios and what percentages of students move up from one grade to the next at each particular school, how those cohorts move up through the system, and then some different weighting schemes based on sort of which data is more relevant over time. Specifically taking into consideration charter impacts is, I will say, the most difficult part of what I do, because charters, well, just several of the points that you mentioned there. If there are additional specific concerns or modeling approaches that the district would like for us to move forward with, we can certainly do that. But what you're seeing here models forward based on the existing trends that occur within the past 5 years worth of data and moves those trends forward for the most part. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Any other questions, Ms. Hauser?
Yeah, I have a couple. First, I want just to build on Will's question. Last week in the Capital Needs Work Group, Wolpert, I know you all are working with Wolpert, and they showed us a heat map for Chapel Hill that showed growth in areas, and then they showed areas where there was substantial loss of students, presumably to charters, but certainly expected students to go into the schools, but they didn't actually show up in the schools. Are you going to be doing that for our schools, to put it like a heat map like that together, that just show us exactly where we're losing students?
Yes, if we're talking about sort of historical data based on student residents, yes, we could provide something like that, very similar to what you've seen from Wilbert. Yes.
Yeah, that would be really helpful. Go ahead. Could you walk us forward? You know, in your report, you talked about, I think you used the term optimal school zones, and what the real constraints are on our redistricting process, particularly transportation. But do you have any sense about what our school zones, what the limits are of what we can do with our school zones? That question makes sense?
It does. It does. So speaking toward potential next steps, there are a series of ways to sort of look at this. I mean, I guess to answer your question most fully, I would say that the types of modeling that we do related to attendance zones, it's minimizing student travel distance, but, and this is the key, I think, speaking to what you're saying, it minimizes student travel distance within the constraints of your building capacities. So the models that we use will not overfill a school, but in hand, that also means at the same time that not all students get to go to the school that is closest to them. And given geographically what you're looking at as a district and where your schools are placed, there will be challenges related to student travel distance, certainly. Does that answer your question?
Almost. I mean, I think the real question for our board is we want to look at some other factors in addition to travel, and even for the public, our choices are not unlimited. And so we just want to know, what choices do we really have with student reassignment? You know, we talk about setting priorities. So how far can we go with that is the real question.
Some other, just based on our experience working from other districts across the state, I mean, there are certainly other assignment plans that have been generated looking at factors such as balancing test scores, or specifically wanting to have clean feeder patterns where 3 elementary schools feed up cleanly into 1 middle school, that sort of thing. Those are several of the other major topics that we hear about and that we can use in our modeling to try to accomplish the objectives of the boards that we work with.
Okay. I have if I
Ms.
can.
Molly?
I have I think a request for a clarification and then a question. So the request is small and it isn't going to impact the modeling, I think, but in sort of your context about Orange County Schools section, there's a section called race and ethnicity that sort of lays us out compared to a couple of other districts. And the graphs include race, but not, we have a significant Latino or Hispanic population that isn't really reflected there at all. It's about a quarter of our students. And so I think you use census data and that the census captures that in a separate way, like as a separate question or something. But I think it would, for the historical record, I think it would be good to add that in there so that we have a reflection of our true student body. Because right now, if you look at those graphs, it just doesn't actually represent our student body by race and ethnicity. So that's the clarification request. The question I have is, so I can see like a footnote, pre-K not included here, which makes sense. When we get to the stage of actually doing the modeling of the assignments, will we be able to preserve some spaces like that in buildings? So not just take these capacities, but say, and this one has 3 pre-K classrooms, and this one has an EC separate settings classroom. And so that those things, we know sort of internally and have had like endless discussions about how those impact actual capacity in buildings. will you be able to take that into account when you're doing your modeling?
Yes, absolutely. Those capacities, both the ones in this table and the capacities that would be used as part of the attendance zone optimization work, they come from the school district. So we would be glad to use whichever set of capacities you would like for us to.
Awesome. Then that is a request for staff, that when we provide them this information, we make sure that we don't just go with these capacities, but also take into account the pre-K and the other various types of capacity needs we've talked about in the past.
Any further questions from anyone? Yes, ma'am.
Justin, I don't know if it's for you or for our staff. I was just curious what our timetable looks like going from here.
In a traditional, please go forward.
Yes, I said the outline we presented from day one, we're still able to stay on track, whereas we transition to September, we have our first draft of maps and the like. But prior to that, we still need to define priorities, as we just discussed here, across the district, and what the board is wanting to kind of emphasize in that space. And as we carry through August, we'll have time to be able to do that before a first map presentation has occurred in September. So what we have outlined on our website regarding where we are in this space remains. We're still in a good space there.
Good to know. Thank you. Any other questions? Well, gentlemen, we definitely appreciate this information tonight. It's very helpful. And we look forward to seeing what transpires in September as we move forward with this. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Ms. Rath.
Yes. Good evening, Chair. Good evening, Vice Chair, board members. Thank you. This evening, as you saw in the board abstract that was presented, we need to have a discussion about balancing our fiscal year 23-24 budget. If you recall from our budget committee meeting last week, as well as the materials that were provided in the board abstract, we have identified that there is approximately $915,000 that remains unbudgeted, that I am here this evening to hopefully seek direction from the board of how to prioritize that spending so that we may be able to get a finalized budget before you for approval. The intent, I am going to try to share my screen and walk through a Excel spreadsheet where we can, as we talk through each of these items, we can see how they reduce your total amount that we are looking for. Okay.
We don't really have a way to guide you in the discussion. And Madam Chair, I guess you just need to sort of manage comments or questions from your seat and try and figure out what the board's priorities are as best you can, and we'll subtract as we go.
Can I ask a starter question first?
Yes, ma'am.
You know, the ESSER funding runs out next year, and there are some positions that are currently in ESSER that we might decide it makes sense to keep them on ESSER for this year until the funding runs out. But then at that point, we're going to need to find the funding in our budget for them. Is there a world where we can sort of take some of this funding now and reserve it into fund balance, knowing that that's going to be our future purpose in the event? Because if the county doesn't give us an increase in funding for next year, you know, then we're gonna, I don't know what we're gonna do about those positions at that point.
Yes, from my lens, we could absolutely earmark a certain dollars of this $915,000 increase that we're working with, and say that after our ESSER dollars expire, that this portion that we are receiving in our per pupil funding will start to allocate to support that position. Now, for this current fiscal year, it would roll into fund balance because we would be utilizing ESSER until ESSER dollars expire, but we would be able to identify them going forward, if that made sense. I saw you had a quizzical look. I hope that okay.
That does make sense. And, I'm just thinking about this desire to sort of build up our fund balance a bit more as well. And yeah, so I just don't want us to get caught next year with positions that are on ESSER that we're having to make really difficult decisions otherwise. So that's one thing that is on my mind as a board member.
Understand. What I tried to capture before you now to help guide this conversation is those priorities that you did identify when we were looking at building our budget and building our request for the commissioners. I also did add the items that at the bottom of this list that we know have not been funded for the board to have the ability to see what the cost of those were historically, to determine if they would like to allocate these funds to support those initiatives. And that would be the planning period stipends, the substitute incentives, and the permanent daily subs. So I look to you now for some direction based upon this list that you developed, and you have discussed prioritization of the list as a board, and all of these items were on your final list of how you would envision the $915,000 being allocated towards these.
I have a question. I don't see the certified increases here. So I see the classified salary step increase, but we had talked about.
Yes, we did, and I apologize. That was probably left off because of the classified salary step was 500,000. The certified, the only thing that we can increase for the certified would be supplements.
Yes, that's
because
what yes,
the state determines what their pay scales are. The only thing that we could address would be the supplements, and we can definitely add something in here for that.
Yes, I think we had a number for it in the earlier spreadsheet.
Yeah. Dr. Moore, you had your hand up.
Yes. So under the priorities that we have, do we have any recommendations from principals, what their students and what their school needs? I think it would be important to include them since they're there with the students every day. So I just don't know if this came from principals. That's what I'm trying to figure out.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think this is what the board had said that we wanted to look at, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
The one thing on the list that I think did come from principals via a conversation in the Student Achievement Committee was the permanent daily sub. I think that's probably the meeting that it came up in. But I think we've heard repeatedly from principals that having that substitute that's in their building every single day that can go where needed is valuable. And that's one that I would really support us continuing to fund.
I have a question, but I just wanted to clarify. I think you and I had a long talk about this. There's a permanent subs in the building that's been budgeted, right? So these are, right?
These are those daily subs that were given during COVID that show up to the school every day and are there to substitute or to be assigned wherever the need is for that day.
So these are the permanent daily subs that are in the bill, assigned to the schools, which is different than.
These are not your daily subs who call into our substitute system. Those are in the budget, yes.
Okay, so Sarah's, yes, I'm with Sarah. For some reason, I thought that was already in the budget, but okay. Could you just clarify for us what we're expecting from the state in terms of raises for certified and classified staff?
That's a great question. I wish I knew.
I understand. Maybe you can give us a range. Here's what the House wants, here's what the Senate, I mean.
So the range is 2.5% to 4%, roughly. And that's looking at 1 year, not over the biennium. It is a much larger percentage that came out of the House over the biennium. But if I just look at it on a year-to-year basis, we're looking, the ranges are from 2.5% to 4%.
And is that classified also, or just certified? That's
It's just certified.
And what does it look like for classified?
I don't know. That's a great question. Last year, I can tell you that across the board, it was an average of 4%. I would love to see that for our staff again. I am not real confident that the percentage will be that high again, but I would love to see it.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Dole?
Thank you, Chair Purcell. A couple of questions or comments about the classified and certified. For classified, the salary step, so it's listed in the worksheet, I think, is increase the classified salary step to 1%, which is 2 million, which we don't have. But we are starting with we had increased 0.3%. Am I correct?
That is correct. We had increased 0.3% for the fiscal year that we just closed. This recommendation would be to increase another 0.125% to get the salary steps to equate to 0.5% for each year of experience.
Oh, okay. I'm looking at, maybe I'm looking at a different document. I'm looking at the one that's a worksheet. The one I'm looking at had it as 2 million to increase it to 1%. And I was thinking even if we did another 1/8 of that to get to the 4/8, it would be like 400,000. Is that what you're?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Okay, great. And then the other one I was wondering about was, I wanted to mention just the importance in my vantage point of the certified supplement tiers and putting focus there to keep our certified staff. I know Durham Public Schools just granted another stipend to certified staff. I got a notice about it this week. And so I think we just need to continue to work towards that. And they also support the process for national board certification. And so far we don't support that. And I think it'll be good to begin building towards that. So those are a couple that I think are important to keep us competitive with neighboring districts.
At one time, correct me if I'm wrong, at one time, we did support teachers with the national board certification, correct? That we paid at least part of it, am I correct?
I don't believe so. I'm
Never
not
did.
aware of us paying part of the fee for them to take the test. Now, we do pay for the substitutes to allow them to have the time where they can take off to prepare for that, but I'm not aware of us paying for the actual.
Maybe that's what I was thinking about. I knew that we had done something to
Yes.
help them with that. Okay. I agree with Ms. Doyle. I think that's important for our staff.
Chair Purcell, can I?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Ms. Smiley?
Okay, so you mentioned the range and state increase. Have you budgeted for the 4%?
I did.
Okay, good, okay. The row that you added for the local supplement increase, the earlier estimate for that was roughly $2 million, $2,011,300. So just so you have a number there. And yeah, I mean, just in this recruitment climate, I just really feel like that is the local supplement. I think we are behind and it needs to be restructured to be more competitive. And the national board certification relatively is a smaller estimate. So, I think that helps a bit, but my focus is really on the local supplement itself. we obviously couldn't do the whole $2 million, so we need to look at what we could do.
Madam Chair, can I get consensus, I guess, of how to capture what the board would like to prioritize to carry forward in a budget to be able to reflect that for you?
Since we're sort of all over the place, what would be the best way for you to have that information?
I think what I need from you as a collective body is for you to state what you want the $915,000 to be allocated to. Again, what has been presented here before you are the items that you chose when we were developing the budget. And then, of course, we added in those items that were initiatives that are not in the budget for you to have the opportunity, if you so wish, to continue those, to add them to the budget. So, you know, what I'm not quite sure how to help, other than I know I've got $900,000 that we have to work with. Hopefully the range to show the cost that is to the far out here to the side helps us be able to determine, we know this local salary supplements of $2 million. Unfortunately, we don't have those funds available to allocate out of what we have right now.
How would this board like to present this to Ms. Rath? Because it's got to be a consensus. What would you like to do?
Bonnie has her hand
I
up.
just have a, because there's things on here that the board likes, and we could talk about some of that. But I would be interested in hearing what the principals have to say as to what they think is needed for staff retention, for delivery of outcomes in schools, for the things that they need to do their job. So I'm a little, so can we create a process where we might talk about what we'd like to see, but how do we balance that against what the principals feel is really essential?
Yeah, we talked in the budget committee a little bit about, I agree that I think it would be, while these are all of the things that the board members are interested in, understanding staff perspective. So I think that principal perspective, but also, you know, central, and the superintendent's perspective on, and I know you just got here, but, you know, on what are going to be our biggest levers, you know, what our strategic plan is, and you know, some about what's going on right now, like what are going to be our biggest levers. I would like to see us just pull out and fund that permanent daily sub thing. I feel like it was so clear that the principals needed it. I don't know. I just, with the level of absences we've had, I just don't know. We need a solution to that. So this feels like the one.
I'm sorry, Sarah, can you say, what did you want to pull out?
The permanent daily subs. I would like, I would love to go through a process, but that one feels.
I agree.
What I am hearing from one board member is
That's right.
to see what that would pull us to. I guess there's a lag in my spreadsheet calculating.
And I would wonder, if we did that, should there be a cap put on it? Or it just go all year long?
Well, do you hire the person for all year? The permanent daily sub? Do they still get a daily rate?
So these subs get a higher daily rate. I am sure that it could be considered where we could look at them being on a half a year employment. Of course, you always take the risk of, when you use that approach, that you could lose staff who would be willing to commit.
If you've got, I mean, there's a budget amount, 130, that's your cap, 132,000. I mean, if we priced it correctly, one per school, that should reflect the cost to run for the full year.
Okay. I don't know, is there board consensus, or should we have a vote or something on that one?
Would you like to put that in the form of a motion?
Sure, I motion to add, I'm not sure we should go through everything this way, but I will motion to add and fund the permanent daily sub.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so if we take that into account, that brings our amount down to 783,000.
Ms. Purcell, can I ask?
Yes, ma'am.
I just have a question, something that's not on the list that's come to our attention, and that's that we reduced the budget for tutoring services this year. And I was just curious what the reaction has been to that and whether we need to add that to this list.
So the NC Ed Core budget was adjusted this year, and that is funded from ESSER. The intent, from my understanding, and please correct me if I'm wrong, colleagues, is that we would begin to be working for our teacher assistants and others to gain that knowledge to be able to step in and provide that tutoring to our students where it would not be an additional cost to the district at the time that ESSER dollars expire. And I'll just, if you have further questions, I'll look to my colleagues in regards to that. I'll stay in my lane with the budget.
I have a question about whether there's a specific timeline around needing to like nail down the board's specific priorities. I think because I'm seeing things like I see the additional ELL teacher on here, and I think that was added because of the increase in our multilingual learner population.
This was in addition, from my understanding, this was an additional ELL teacher, but
That was a request from the board above what staff thought.
this was a request from staff, this was one of the staff's recommendations that was presented to the board.
Right, so for example, in terms of how I'm making my decisions, right, my vote, whatever I'm going to support, that was from our staff based on our increase in multilingual learner. I would support that one over some of the other things because I feel like you all have demonstrated a real need for that, and so this is where I'm like, do we have a timeline? Because it would be really helpful for me if staff understood all of these things that are important to board members and took all of that and considered them and came back with these, this is sort of our recommendation for how do we spend the money.
So I'll try to answer that from my lens. So we're operating under a continuation budget at this time. So we are within state statute in our ability to continue operating and going forward. Some of these decisions impact schools' ability to hire staff, and also some of these decisions will impact as we're getting ready to start school up and communicating with staff. For example, the permanent daily subs that we just got consensus of that this board is wanting to fund those, that allows us to ensure that those positions are staffed and that we're able to communicate that with our principals as they're getting ready to open up their schools, that they will have this position going forward into the next school year. Those are the kind of the challenges and the struggles that we have, in particular, the substitute incentives, the planning period stipends, any of these additional positions. We're running into the time constraint of actually being able to hire the individuals to have them in our buildings when we're opening schools in 9 days.
One of the things that we don't have is we haven't seen the grades from last year. We don't know what the principals are looking at in terms of their own goals and their school improvement plans for their schools. So it's difficult for us to make decisions about priorities, right? So right now, these are, they feel like ideas, many good ones, really good ones, but we don't have the data. If we wanted to make data-driven decisions, we don't have data. At least I don't see it.
The ELL position, that staff brought, do you know what school needed that? Was that New
I would
Hope?
have to get back. I do not know that right now.
Yeah, it says middle, one teacher for middle and elementary, it says.
So 2 ELL
So
positions.
which schools would they be at? Do we know?
Good evening. If you recall, back in December of 2022, Ms. Lewis and I came and spoke with you. We presented to you the increase in the ML population data as well as our newcomer population. In January, we had one new ESL teacher who started. We split that position across River Park and Pathways due to the increase at those two buildings. And we talked then about an increase looking at high schools. We have reallocated the ESL positions that we have currently based on the numbers of students that are actively being served, whether they are exited or currently active in terms of their services for eligibility, whether they're an ML or a newcomer. We would re-look at all of those numbers once we have WIDA screener data for all of our incoming kindergartners, but we are seeing a continuous influx of our ML population across Orange County schools.
So I know we're splitting a teacher now, I think between Gravelly and Standback, right? We've added a ESL.
Not for ESL or ML.
Or maybe it's, okay. So, I mean, I think the question is which schools, where would we be putting the additional staff? That's,
So we'll have to go back and look at all of the schools and the caseload of the teachers. So for example, even the teacher that we added in January, the caseload for that individual looks different this year than it looked in January. And so actually that one individual, based on another school having an increased population again, is now serving 3 schools. So that we can balance out the needs in all of our buildings.
Well, what I'm hearing is that you more than likely need another teacher.
I
Is
do
that
stand by that
correct?
request, yes, but I understand that you also have a long list of asks.
Well, given the fact that we do have an influx of students in this district, and they need to be served, I would definitely go along with the additional ESL, ELL teacher.
All right, I'll motion to approve that. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Will.
No, I was just agreeing that I would as well.
I'm going to motion to approve the additional ELL, MLL teacher.
I'll second that.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I did have one thought or question.
Sure.
And I agree with everyone about trying to understand the principal's thoughts around this, because we have had a lot of changes, right? We've had people that have moved around, and one of the things that I remember is one of the items on here was talking about additional TAs. And I was kind of surprised when I saw that some schools had more TAs than other schools. And, it just seems strange to me that, what was the actual needs based on the TAs versus what we saw. But I would definitely prefer to hear what the principals are asking for. Is it planning period stipends? Is it TAs? Is it tutors? What is going to help them be successful? Or, is it additional supplements? I would love to hear that feedback as well.
Chair Purcell,
Yes, ma'am.
could we add the 2 nurse tech positions to this possibly?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know they came to a meeting a while back. I think that's important too.
The tutors.
No,
Yes.
2 nurse techs.
Nurse tech.
The nurse techs.
Oh,
Yes.
yes. Excuse me, I'm sorry, I didn't understand you. Are they on?
Your consensus for those to be added?
It's the second, I guess, additional.
Oh, nurse tech, oh, yeah.
School nurses.
Additional school nurses, is that the nurse techs or is that school nurses?
I think
Techs. That's the techs. Okay.
So,
What-
you have. you
No,
can
I was
still-
going to ask what would be the difference? I mean, additional school nurses, and I think there is 3 there. So that, would that include the 2 nurse techs plus a additional? Okay,
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
That
And
would
I,
be 2 nurse techs and 1 nurse.
yes.
and I can say personally, I just know how important the school nurses are, especially at the high school level.
Absolutely.
And I can't give you a head count, but there are numerous calls that go out to the schools where children are in need of some kind of health service almost on a daily basis. And so when you have one school nurse that's attending one student and then another one comes out, that can be very challenging. And so that's why we have 2 school resource officers at the high school level in case there's a situation that one's dealing with, and another arises, they can deal with it, that other 2. So I think that's very important to look at and consider.
So, okay, so my understanding from our conversation earlier is that we could theoretically, let's say we just decided to budget that, we could take the other 490 and say, we're just going to plan to roll that over into fund balance and like spend that on the ESSER expenses next year or something. So we're sort of deciding not to do the rest of this. That's a way we could do it. I'm not proposing that. What I think that suggests to me is we just need to know from you all, like, which of these things are the things that are like holding you back from starting the school year? You know, some of them we could decide to do later. National board certification fee support, we could decide to do that in March if we have the money. You know what I mean? There's some of them. And then there's other things like, are the substitute incentives, like, do you need that in order to have enough like, do you think you need that this year or not? You know, I don't know, whichever, if we were able to identify which of these things are really going to hold you back right now, if we don't decide on them. Like the ELL teacher, like I get we need to, and the daily sub. Is there anything else that's like that in this list where we just need to have a conversation just about that before we decide how to prioritize the rest of the money?
At this time, I think what you have addressed for me would be the most pressing. I do believe that the planning period stipends, a decision regarding those, as well as the substitute incentives, is a short, we're going to need something in the very near future, as you know, as schools are opening up and you know, as we are continuing to recruit and recruit substitutes to come to the district.
So I was just going to summarize the discussion from budget, but you go.
Well, I was just going to say the daily subs kind of crosses over a little bit with if schools have daily subs, there's less of a demand for the planning period stipend. It's like, I don't know how you sort out how that need is reduced when we have approved the daily subs.
I understand and agree with your logic. The numbers that are presented here are what the actual cost were to the district last year in each of these categories.
So in Budget Committee, we talked about capping the stipends and capping it at, I'm going to make 25, I don't know if it's 25,000 or 50,000, but at something substantially lower than, what do you have on there, 200,000? So something substantially lower. Obviously, if we find that we need more the money, then it will force us to ask the question why, because we really want our teachers to have their planning periods. And so that's what we talked about in Budget Committee, is rather than just throw a couple $100,000 at it, throw a cap on it, and then see what we have to do.
The other thing we talked about was we could do it that way, and just when the money runs out, or we decide to keep doing it. The other thing we decided we could do is just not tackle it this way at all. Say we are unable to pay you for working during your planning period, covering classes during your planning period. But when someone needs to cover for a more extended period of time, which I think is some sort of policy decision you all would need to come up with about what constitutes that we would handle that through a extra duties contract and pay that, so maybe we need a budget for those extra
You need
duty
a budget,
contracts.
you need a budget for it either way.
Might need
whatever
a
you-
budget for that, and then because right now I think we're doing it through lab salaries or something, so maybe we have a much smaller budget for that, but we just rip the Band-Aid off and say we don't have the money for this in a non-ESSER situation.
Well, I
right
think
now.
whether we call it an extra duty stipend or a planning period stipend, it's still an additional stipend. And the question is, do we want to budget? I thought we did say we'd want to set some budget aside, just cap it.
Yes, I think there's a policy decision, there's a district policy decision about whether, if you just cover this one period, do you also get that? And we do all of that, or is it some defined longer period of time, which is, I think, what the district's recommendation was. And I'm in favor of, because I think this is not financially sustainable right now.
Right.
I don't think it is either. Is that total cost on here?
The planning period stipends last year cost the district $194,700.
Okay.
So we want to contain it. I just would hate to I don't want to ask our teachers to do something and not get compensated for it.
I understand.
Right. I mean, we want them to, again, I'm going to say this again, we want them to take their planning periods, but if they're not, if they're going above and beyond, they should be paid. And if that's happening a lot, then we need to understand why and see if there's a different problem that needs our attention.
I feel like policy 7406 and what has been implemented there will be able to provide the mechanism to ensure that, the board is aware and has to approve all of those extra duty assignments and that extra duty compensation.
Yes, right now we're doing it transaction by transaction.
That's
So we're not
correct.
doing it to a cap. So we want to do it to and that created some of the problems. So the goal is, and it's a policy decision we'll have to discuss, but the goal is to set a cap
I
so
agree.
that we're managing it.
I agree.
And I think in budget, we talked about setting a cap, but we didn't put a price on that cap, did we?
No, we did not.
Do you all have a thought about an appropriate amount?
Not on the fly without giving it some
That is-
consideration.
That's totally fine.
I would hate to just throw a number.
Do you have what you need here for the moment if the board has some consensus around the approach to planning periods and stipends?
I've heard a cap, and I've heard maybe some guidelines or guardrails around it being for, you would get the stipend if it was for an extended period of time, that it would just not be as it was in the past, where if I taught during the planning period on Monday and taught during the planning period on Friday, that I would get the stipend, but that I'm hearing, correct me if I'm wrong, that the consensus is that it would be a commitment for a period of time, and that also that we would cap less than what it cost us last year, which is the cap that is in place currently, that we would cap it below the $195,000.
That is accurate to me. Is it to everybody else? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just speaking for the discussion we had earlier. That's not what we want to do. We understand that teachers should be paid for all of that time that they do coverage. Financially, it does not seem like something we can continue in a world where we don't have ESSER. And if we can devote any of those dollars to increasing supplements and things like that that are going to keep people, then maybe that'll solve some of this problem from a different angle.
And I would just like to propose that we listen on that, because I'm concerned about saying we're not going to do it, and then we're finding out that we have a high absentee rate if our teachers and people are covering classes. So if that happened, we may have to revisit that. So I want us to pay attention to that. If the board really wants to make it go away, I'd like to
Are
pay.
you saying that we would lift the cap if we had more people out? Or
I
if we
think
had
the cap is the cap, and to me, the cap, for starters, is not, it's, right now, we're gonna set a cap, and we may hit the cap in 3 months, but then we have to ask ourselves, why are we spending so much time on stipends? The point I'm making is I'm hearing the board wants to give longer-term stipends. We just approved some long-term stipends or extra, for longer-term assignments and pay stipends for that. But if it's a daily, if we have lots of absenteeism and teachers are teachers are giving up planning periods to cover classes, where I'm hearing the board say, we don't want to pay for that. And if that's happening a lot, I'm not sure. We may want to pay for that. So before we cut it, I'd like to have a sense of what that, or if the board doesn't want to offer it, that's fine, but I'd like to hear, if we're hearing from the principals in the schools that we have lots of absenteeism and the teachers are covering planning period or giving up their planning periods, I would like us to revisit paying them for it.
But I just don't know that we can sustain at $195,000 a year to cover.
None of this is sustainable. If we
No,
have
I know,
teachers,
but-
if we have teachers that are constantly giving up their planning periods, we are going to have to dig in deeper and find out what's going on. I mean, I would be setting a cap at something like $50,000. That's where I would be. I'm making up the number. It's not 100 and it's not 200, but I would be setting a cap because it forces us, as we're getting close to the cap, to go in and find out what's going on, what's going wrong. Because these stipends are a warning indicator. If we're spending a lot of them, it means that our teachers are not getting their planning periods. So if we're spending a lot of money on them, we need to understand.
Let's back up to the school nurses. Did we decide that we wanted to do that or not do that? The two, the techs and one nurse. I, for one, am in favor of that. I think it's needed, but, I'm do what the pleasure of the board is, but, to me, that's something that's needed. Yes, ma'am.
My notes say that we were paying for that through ESSER. And do we have the option to continue to fund that at least for the next year through ESSER?
But if we're looking down the road and we don't have ESSER, do we
Understand.
need to start now?
Well, understand, I just a question.
There's always so when we fund it from ESSER, you have to look at what you're taking away your ability to do from ESSER. When we looked at it in the budget committee, I believe we were down to, it was under $1 million based upon what has already been committed that would be available for summer programming for a year from this past summer. Is what we would be basically taking away from. And, again, you have the authority to make that decision to be able to fund it from ESSER. Again, the funding cliff is coming with ESSER. And of course, I would caution about adding any more positions into ESSER funding because they are recurring and that funding cliff is a year away.
Last year, we were continuing to do lots of COVID-related work and a lot of COVID-type screening in our schools. So I just don't know, are we completely out of that? And do we really have a good idea of what the nurse workloads are? And are our nurses on permanent long-term workloads? That's the only question I have.
I have a proposal about one of these items. to get it off the list. And then at some point, okay, so I'll just say that one first. The substitute incentives. I think we don't know what would happen if we stopped doing the substitute incentives and whether we would have any trouble getting substitutes. But I think if we needed to dip into fund balance to reinstitute that, we could. So one thought is, what if we take that out of the budget for this year? And if it turns out we're having difficulty getting substitutes to work enough, that we dip into fund balance to pay for that. Or lapse salaries. Or wherever.
Fine with me.
I don't know. I would be curious for human capital's reaction to that idea. I don't know if the proposal is to keep it. I think the proposal was to discontinue it. The proposal was to discontinue it.
Yes, the recommendation
So
was to discontinue it.
So I think we should discontinue it. And if we are having trouble with subs, then we go back and find money.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm fine with Sarah's suggestion. I don't want to cut that off. I wanted to come back to the nurse question. And Bonnie raised the question about how much of this was COVID related. I remember that one of the positions with Orange High School has to do with the student population being so much more, such a larger population than Cedar Ridge. So some of it just has to do with student body and not COVID related. So at least
Yeah,
for one
it's
of those
just,
positions.
it's just a question. It's just a question.
I'm just providing
Yeah,
a
okay.
response to the question, that one of them was not about COVID, but had to do with student numbers.
And it is, and yeah, I know, I understand. Orange High School does have more than Cedar Ridge. And I think the nurse techs had been utilized in ways that really helped nurses. So as I said earlier, I would be in favor of doing that. I think if we look at the subs, I like Sarah's idea that if it's a problem, then we find the money some other way. But I do agree that we need to find out what is at the root of the problem for everybody being out and
Absolutely.
taking advantage, maybe, I don't know. I think that needs to be looked at. We only have so much money and we have so many things that need to be done.
Our option could be at this time that we wait, that the board, based upon the decisions that you have provided here, that you can always let the additional savings accumulate for fund balance and make decisions for those one-time. Of course, I would not be recommending any recurring expenditure be utilized out of fund balance. That's a very dangerous precedent to set. But it is the option that you could look at these funds could be utilized to accumulate, building back the amount that was spent from fund balance this year and adding it back. And then utilizing those funds for the ESSER positions that we know ESSER is going to be coming to an end, to be able to shift those from ESSER into your local budget.
I would support that. And it gives us a little bit of opportunity to build up fund balance and a little bit of opportunity to have some flexibility this year if we need something. I'd be supportive of that.
I think there's two more items, though, before we give up, and that's the TAs. I think there's a question, I think Will asked it earlier, about disparities in the number of TAs in our schools. And
So TAs are allocated. I'm sorry for cutting you off. I just wanted to share that the way that they are provided to the schools is based upon the number of classrooms. They're allocated the way that the state provides us funding for those. So it's based upon the number of kindergarten, first and second grade classrooms.
understand, and the principals use them differently. So one principal might decide to use them in upper grades, and some of them like
That's
to put
correct.
them in early
The
grades.
principals have the autonomy to make that decision at the school.
And so the only question is, are there some principals that said, if I could have one or two more TAs, that would make a really big difference in terms of improving student outcomes? It's a question for them. And because there does seem to be differences in our schools in terms of, and I don't know if it's TAs that are filling in for teachers. I don't know if it's TAs that are filling in other roles, because of teacher absences. I just don't know what's happening in our schools and whether an additional TA in any of the schools. I mean, obviously, we don't have $1 million for it, but, are there any schools that might benefit, feel that they benefit? I would like to hear that. And the other thing we haven't talked about is behavior. And the proposal was made for Sidekicks Academy to pilot it in one of our schools. It's a popular program. Again, we have not had that conversation with our principals, but there's been a conversation about bringing that into one of our middle schools. I think Gravely was at the top of the list, but again, nobody has spoken to Mrs. Williamson about it. So, but it could be something that makes a difference. So how do we do that? So those are things on the list that I think the principals, if the principals weighed in and said, if Mrs. Williamson said, I want to do Sidekicks Academy, then I would like to see that on the list. If she doesn't want it, then I don't care.
I think with $700,000 and that one's 75, I mean, we
75,000.
couldn't give $75,000 to every school. You know what I mean? Like I don't know. I think the idea of hearing what principals need is important and having conversations about these items. So that's, if you all desire to do that and come back with some additional recommendations, and that's, another thing we could do with that fund balance, right?
With what we have given you tonight, Ms. Rath, how much of that $900,000 have we?
We are down to $703,000 that is not budgeted.
So Madam Chair, the only thing I wanted to add is I still feel strongly about the district level field trips and ensuring that students get the opportunity. I'm not sure that the current allocated amount would make sense given our finances, but knowing that not all of our elementaries are going to the mountains or the beaches or even going to these different places that they're reading about and they may never get the opportunity. I think it's a way for us to distinguish ourselves in equity and getting barriers removed. So when we come back with all those discussions, I definitely would like to talk about that one again and the possibility of how we could look at something like that.
Okay, I think that too is a conversation that needs to be had by principals.
Agree. That's why I was saying when it comes back to see what they are saying about that.
And maybe even Dr. Merrill has some ideas on that. I'm not sure.
I think I'm toying with different things, but I think you're not going to get a unified response from principals. You're going to get 13 different ways to spend money, which is sort of what you're doing right now. I mean, as 7 of you looking at this. So I'm taking 700,000, I'm dividing by either all the ADM in the district, I'm coming up with a per pupil times the number of kids in a school, and I'm ignoring factors and I'm just going crazy, okay? And I'm going, okay, so you've got $48,000. What would you do with it? You've got $62,000. What? It's tailored to what their need is, their school improvement plan. It could be a way to think about that gets a meaningful response from principals for their situation, rather than trying to force them to agree, well, all you elementaries, you either take TAs or you don't, or you must all take field trips or you don't. So that could be a way to try and get at this 700. Or you play with 500 and you park 200 for when we hit a cap on something we've set a cap on, then we come back. We've still got a little money to carry us for another month while we debate a solution. So that's as far as I've gone, as I've watched you. Not surprised that you're struggling with it. You can't make big program impact with the little bit you've got. Big program impact is supplement, for instance. There's just no money to do it. So you gotta take the little pieces and say, okay, what can we do with this? Or maybe you do something where you give some latitude to a principal and a school-based team. You say, okay, if you've got this much money, what do you want to do with it? One-time money. But we can certainly get something from principals if that's what you'd like.
Thank you for the summary. Because, the goal, I think, of the conversation is we don't want a one size fits all solution. And we want to be responsive. And I would invite you, as you're having the conversations, to throw an equity factor onto it. To say, are there things that affect our, could be income, it could be English language learners. I think the field trip conversation is really about our lower income families being unable to pay for the field trips. So anyway, but certainly I think it's moving away from a one size fits all solution is exactly, I think, what the board is. I think that's what I'm looking for.
What does the board think of Dr. Merrill's idea of giving the principals X amount of dollars and letting them use it to their?
We don't, almost treat it like a grant.
A grant.
Here's the potential you could earn. What would you do with it, subject to our review and your approval?
And they would
Okay?
have to, they would have to have a plan
Yeah.
to use that money. Sarah?
So my reaction to that is I think it's very interesting. You did say in your framing of it, one-time money, which I do think if we did it that way, then we would still have that money preserved for those ESSER positions next year, which I think would be wise. Just so you know, we tried something like this with ESSER funding where we had a pot of money that was, schools could apply for grants for one-time needs to meet whatever their school, whatever they were seeing in their school due to COVID. Schools, we did not get many requests from schools. They really struggled to figure out what to do with the money on a one-time basis. So that's the rub there. But I'm certainly open to the idea. What we ended up with last time was unspent money because folks didn't request it.
Well, my thought on that is that now we're still struggling with COVID, and there may be a need there that they see that they didn't know about when kids were out for COVID. So things may have changed with that a little bit, I would think, maybe. Yes, ma'am.
I'm not sure why it would have to be one-time money. I know some of the schools are struggling with part-time positions and other positions that they would like to bring on more, so $30,000 would make a big difference in terms of their ability to fill positions. But certainly, I don't see why it needs to be one time. It certainly is, this is recurring money.
I'm trying to position you for next spring because you do have, close to $1 million of ESSER that you're
right.
going to have to reconcile.
It's a bigger discussion.
We're gonna have to find out how we're gonna fund those positions between now and then. Dr. Merrill, you help me with this. Would it be beneficial for you to ask principals if they would be interested in moving this way with us taking, say, $200,000 or $300,000 out of this, whatever we decide on, putting it in fund balance or wherever the best place is that Ms. Rouse thinks to put it, and then giving them the opportunity to talk with their school improvement teams and their staffs and see what they could use this money that would be, if we have this much money, I want it to be the most bang for our buck.
Right.
And I don't know that these 7 people are the ones to determine what the best bang for the buck is.
I think the principals would love the opportunity as long as it's worth their time. If it's $10,000 one-time money, I don't know. I mean, lots of times some grants are too small and it's not worth the energy. So, I'd be looking to take a pretty good chunk of that 700 to be able to affect 13 schools. But I think principals would love to be able to talk about it.
How much would you recommend if we took to put it, or both of you will probably need to get together and work on that as far as pulling out to put in fund balance and then offering the other 2 as grants for principals?
I'd rather play with it a little bit and see. I'm somewhere between probably 30 and 50 per school. Just craziness to get somebody's attention and say this is worth our time to try and figure something out.
Well, is it the pleasure of this board that we would move in that direction and let you, Ms. Rath, and you discuss, and then you take 2 principals and see what we could do? Yes, Bonnie?
Yeah, I just have one other point in terms of the fund balance. We also have lapsed salaries, right, as a possible vehicle that provide, right? Last year it was about $2 million, if I remember. But, can we make it, and it's outside of this budget discussion, but if the concern is about restoring fund balance, is lapsed salaries a vehicle for that? So that we can commit our operating budget and use unused funds over the year.
Lap salaries is a vehicle for that, keeping in mind that it is our ultimate goal to fill every position.
Of course, of course.
Okay, Ms. Doyle?
I agree with the direction. I like the idea of Dr. Merrill and Ms. Rath and their team making recommendations. And Dr. Merrill also mentioned considering ADM of school, I believe. I heard you say that. So I would love for a recommendation that incorporates their guidance.
Okay. Do you want to put that in the form of a?
Can I just add one more
Yes,
thing to
ma'am.
that? I support that as well. And, if there's some portion of this funding and the sets of things that you think are important that you also want to prioritize, like, I don't think we need to take every penny necessarily and put it in that pot or fund balance. If there's some stuff that we've missed that you think is important from a central level, I'd like that to be part of the recommendation as well.
Can we pin down the ones you did agree on
Absolutely.
and consider that part of it? And rather than take that and say, okay, we're going to move that over to fund balance so we can pull it out again, I want to name a bucket to put it in as part of the budget, rather than thinking it's just going over to fund balance and we're going to come back and get it again. And the other thing, if I can, I hear you guys too often going to lapse salary as a solution. And that ultimately rolls to fund balance. But spending money in mid-year as it's going by on a one-time basis, which is what lapse salary is, makes me a little nervous. And maybe it's just terminology for me and it's getting late anyway, but we would be happy to play with this and involve principals. They're a little busy right now, but we do want to move quickly on it. But you've hit some key pieces, I think, for us. As one of you asked, is there anything else you need commitment on in order to get up and running? And I think you've given us a couple of chunks that can smooth the entry for us.
Good. So we'll put that in the form of a motion, or y'all just, what would be the best way to handle that, Dr. Merrill?
Move that you ask staff to go ahead and proceed with the ones that you have signaled out, and we make that part of the budget, and that we hold on the remaining balance pending a recommendation from staff.
I make that motion.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. Thank you, Ms. Rath.
Thank you.
This has been painful. Sorry. Okay. Is there any other thing that we need to discuss tonight, or do we need to adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thank you all very much. And thank you to those who stayed to the bitter end.